Welcome to the E01 podcast. Today we interviewed Janet Sernack. Janet is from ImagineNation. She's an innovation and change coach where she focuses in on the people side of innovation. Today we looked at what it means to actually innovate, what the word actually stands for. It's been used all over the place these days, and we took a deep dive into that. We also looked at what the mindset and culture of an organization means when it comes to digital transformation, how that can either hold you back or push you forward, how that impacts the risks that you'll take within your organization. Will you incrementally improve, or will you focus on that big picture, big vision product that will change your environment, change your industry, and even change your business? So Janet was originally from a corporate world. She moved to Israel and then entered into the startup world where she helped startups in the space. Now she's back living in Melbourne, assisting again, back in the corporate world, consulting and training from an innovation and change perspective, but focusing in on people. You'll get a lot out of this conversation. I've known Janet for about a year now. I will introduce through network connections and really got to know her and her mindset and thinking around what innovation and change means, and I'm sure you get a lot of value out of it. Janet, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi Andrew, and good morning.
Good morning.
Gosh, what can I say? I'm a bit of a maverick, a serial entrepreneur,
Yeah.
a passionate innovator, and aspiring to maintain some kind of work-life balance.
It's always a bit of a challenge, isn't it?
In the midst of all this disruption going on.
Yeah, there's a little bit going on out there. So about ImagineNation. So why did you start ImagineNation? What was the thinking behind it, and what's the purpose of ImagineNation?
Oh, that's such a big question. It's interesting that you asked that, because I was just chatting with my husband in the car saying, I've got a 30-year career in corporate learning, and that's enabled me to learn so much myself, because, as a teacher, you always seem to need to learn. You seem to teach what you always need to learn yourself. So 10 years ago, after 20 years in corporate learning and change and culture, we relocated to the Middle East. And as you can imagine, especially with the whole Iranian crisis at the moment, it's a very volatile, complex, ambiguous and uncertain environment, and a very different culture. And one of the reasons we went there is that I wanted to work globally, and I realised pretty quickly that the culture that I came from here in Australia, which is very humanistic, very easygoing, very affiliative, that all of the models and tools and knowledge that I had was no longer relevant in the new world, or in the living on the edge of chaos. Where I was. So it was a great opportunity to reinvent, to be anonymous and reinvent myself. So what I did is I really researched and studied and explored what was the secret ingredients of the success behind Israel as a startup nation. And so I started researching the culture, the whole entrepreneurship scene, which is really vibrant, because there's so much creative energy and enthusiasm and passion for innovation. And before I knew it, I was becoming a startup entrepreneur, and that was how ImagineNation came about. It was invented as an Israeli startup.
Okay. So is that how you see why they're sort of being positioned as the next Silicon Valley, with the way that innovation's been happening there?
Great. Yeah, good question. It's actually called Silicon Wadi, W-A-D-I.
Okay, yeah.
And Israel's now number 10 on the World Innovation Index.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that they're doing, right in the context of innovation. I won't go into the geopolitics, that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
But, being a small country with very limited natural resources and the inability to export to nations close by, and being one of the newest countries in the world, there's the necessity to innovate, and a sense of urgency, and they're the things that I picked up really quickly. So they've got a strong survival need. On the one hand, that's really useful. On the other hand, it could also lead to what we call entropy, by pushing too hard.
From a survival, sometimes it's not always the best place to create either, because you're coming from a place of lack, which doesn't necessarily give that mindset that you need to thrive, right?
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. And in Australia, we've never really had that strong sense of survival. But what I learned was the difference between necessity and the other thing that the Israelis were really good at is, despite all of their challenges, they're very optimistic and positive. So we talk about this balance between necessity and possibility. So if you have that sense of urgency, which we call passionate purpose, and you have the ability to see the world with fresh eyes about what could be, that's a far better motivator, and that's what we teach in our programs.
And so, from your program perspective, mindset probably plays a huge key component of innovation, really, because you're coming from a possibilities mindset compared to I'm just trying to survive here. It's a very different place.
Yeah, and I think the point that you made earlier about innovation being so much about change, we need to be ready and receptive for change to innovate, and we also really need to let go a lot of the old. So if you think of what people hold on to, they hold on to what is safe and what is comfortable, because innovation, the way we teach it, is through emergence. It's about bringing forth the new. So, it's a deep dive in a way into the unknown. So you asked me about mindset. I know from all of my work in organisational culture change, when I worked for Corporate Vision for 12 years, and ran my own consultancy, Encompass Learning, for, I think I've been running that, I don't remember, since 2006, so a long time, is that all change happens, one is from intrinsic motivation and two is from mindset. So when we talk about letting go of the old, it's about paying attention to your old mindset and asking, how is that serving me now, and how might it serve me in the future or not. So all of our work is around motivation. It originates in values, beliefs, and mindset, because all of those things are what triggers people's intrinsic motivation. So we've defined 6 mindsets that we teach in our programs for people to adopt. And if there is that willingness and that receptivity to play with those mindsets and experiment and practice and change your habitual ways of being and thinking, then that, I think, is the secret, one of those secret ingredients to success.
What do you mean by intrinsic motivation? I
Oh,
haven't heard
great
that term
question.
before.
It seems that a lot of people are motivated by reward. So, in classic in business, if you get paid more, you'll do more. With the work of Dan Fink, he's now saying that intrinsic motivation, which is your internal motivation, it triggered, especially in the younger generations, in the millennials, is by a desire for autonomy, so I can run it on my own, a desire for mastery, I want to learn, and can't remember the third one. So, it's coming from within, which is why when we talk about necessity for innovation, is we define that in any business is the business's passionate purpose.
Okay.
So if you have a passionate, that's why I use the words passion, because it's emotional, and purpose because it's targeted. Yeah, and the third thing is people want meaningful work, and that's coming through more and more.
It seems to
all
be
the latest information. Yeah.
so meaningful work seems to be a big thing now because everyone wants to be involved in an organisation that's striving to do something bigger and better or evolve or change. Even social is being a big thing that we're seeing right now. So yeah, meaningful work is becoming something that people are buying into, and in essence, why are we here? We want to serve a purpose. We want to create something. Even from my perspective, it's around new, it's innovative, but it also adds value to people and serves. It's not just about a bottom line anymore. So that becomes a bit of a battle between an organisation's thinking, and when it's around just making dollars for shareholders, and what its people are there for. It may not just be about the dollar anymore. So there is a bit of change happening right now.
Yeah, I first heard a guy called John Medved talk about the triple bottom line.
Okay.
And it was profit, people and planet.
Yeah, I think I've heard that before.
Yeah, but I heard that like 10 years ago, and I can't believe that it's not yet in the vernacular. It's because it's so obvious, people, profit, planet.
It's the 3 Ps, right?
Yeah.
Now, probably I'll dive a little bit more into innovation in a business and what that actually means. So it is a word that just gets thrown around and it's slapped on everything these days. I've seen it plastered around just in our office block. There's an innovative lawyer that's over here, and I find it interesting that this word is just plastered on every piece of marketing material.
A legal practice focusing on innovative solutions.
Yeah, so I get that we can all do something different, but I just want to see what innovation means to you. And what that means when you take it into an organisation.
Again, it's really a great point in that the term itself has become largely commoditised.
Yeah, it has.
And yet the latest data is saying that 53% of leaders say their board often talks about innovation, but nobody seems clear as to what it means.
So it means something different.
You're not on your own.
Yeah, it's something different to every organisation. And probably every person within every organisation as well.
I think on the one hand, that's a really good thing. On the other hand, is that that there's a desire to want to innovate. On the other hand, they need to have a bit of a creative conversation to put it into their own unique context. So we simply go by the Scott Anthony definition, which is change that adds value. Okay. Now, 3 words: change. So change can be incremental, it can be disruptive, it can be radical, or it can be differentiated. So strategically, an organisation has to decide what type of innovation, what type of change they want to create. And value, I think, is really the key word, because it's adding value. What we say is to the quality of people's lives. So, who's your customer? How can you add value to the quality of their life in some way? Who's your user? Who's in your ecosystem? And how can you not only add value to the quality of their lives, but in ways that they appreciate and cherish, so that they will then advocate or stay loyal to you and your product in your business. So that's like the big umbrella that we use to set some context for innovation. But what we also do with all of our clients is actually facilitate a conversation with them to define innovation in their unique context, and align it to their strategy, and align it to their people.
Get that.
So that everybody's singing from the same song sheet, so that they really know what they're aiming for and what they're talking about. The framework is change that adds value.
Yep.
But the whole, it's like most corporate conversations, it's the conversation that actually is really important to have. so that they can all have that clarity, or we say that they all have a common understanding of what innovation means, and then they communicate that, so they make it very explicit.
So that then sort of leads towards an open sharing and of ideas within the organisation itself.
Yeah. And I think that's another good point, is that you don't have an innovation department or an innovation business unit.
Yeah, which
you
so
have
many companies do.
Innovation for everyone every day, which is what I perceived all those years ago when I created ImagineNation. I thought, wow, innovation for everyone every day.
Yeah, so having a handful of people responsible for the innovation doesn't really push that through the entire organisation effectively.
No, it needs to be strategic, and it needs to be systemic, and it needs technology support, and it needs people support. They're like what we would call the 4 quadrants, or the 4 bits of the puzzle.
Okay. So just back to change, I just wanted to sort of look into this a little bit more with you. So you mentioned just a couple of examples. One was incremental, and one is obviously the lowest extreme, and one's a disruptive, which is the more pushing the boundary type. Would you say that the mindset, touching back on what we discussed earlier, would actually, of an organisation, may lead them into a path that they pick? And do you think that's the right way to go about it, or do you believe that it should be led from the consumers, what a consumer wants, rather than what the actual business wants?
I think it's such a big question. Steve Jobs always said, invent it so that people will need it and want it, on the one hand. On the other hand, mindsets in organisations operate unconsciously unless they use a tool like the OGI to actually put them into context and measure them and measure impact on your strategy or on your ability to deliver the results that you want. So, for example, if you have a strong tendency, which I've been reading lately, drives most organisations, which is around analysis, is that you analyse and solve, then your innovation strategy will unconsciously be biased towards that.
It probably depends if you're trying to disrupt or increment.
If
you're trying to be disruptive, you can't ask the customer what they want. Like Ford said, they're going to want a faster horse.
Well,
so if it's incremental, then you can.
In a way, it's a really good question, because we actually did a project with a client who had exactly that mindset, which was unconscious until we did the OGI quantitative survey, and they were thinking that all they needed was more technology and more process, because you could analyse and measure. But when we did the research, what they actually really needed to do was to focus on people, on learning and collaboration and creativity. So it's a double loaded question. They were really good on the process side. So strategically, they were saying we want to improve our customers' experience. And on the other hand, in real life, they were totally disconnected from their customer. So it's a lot about what you talk about as opposed to what you do. And, so it's both. It is being aware. I think every CEO, was one of the things I was saying to my husband as well, is that, why doesn't our government have more foresight? Every CEO, if you're a company of one or a company of, 2,000 people, you need to have foresight, and you need to be able to have that balcony perspective or mindset where you can see the patterns and trends emerging, converging and diverging out there in the world, and then you'll be attuned to your customer because you'll be connected to your customer. So you can sense, this is the new language, you can sense what's going on in the market.
Try and anticipate.
You can perceive that in a different way. I hope I'm not talking in consultantese,
No, that's perfect. I'll pare it back a little bit. You mentioned a little bit about OGI as a measuring tool, because I've obviously been exposed to this a little bit. Tell us a little bit about OGI and what that can mean for an organisation in terms of bringing awareness to what's actually happening across their people, their processes, and the way they're communicating within an organisation, and even externally to their customers.
Yeah, sure. So we all know that what gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
So we know the importance of measurement, and here in Australia we've been measuring culture probably for 25 years.
Yep.
And there's quite a lot of awareness of the need for measures. So we have engagement surveys, we have climate surveys, we have all sorts of different surveys. One of the things when I was living in the Middle East that I really researched and seriously sought was a culture tool that could actually measure mindset. So, you know, we talk about low engagement in Australia. You know, the engagement surveys have a mediocre result, and it's probably a global problem. But an engagement survey just measures the effects of the culture. It actually doesn't measure culture. So it just measures how people are thinking and feeling at work.
Yep.
It doesn't measure why they're thinking and feeling that way. And what it often does is comes up with very tactical solutions like meet more often with my manager, communicate more frequently, give constructive feedback. So all of those things might make work a happier place.
Yeah, correct.
And engage people more, but it's not dealing with the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to your mindset question, I always knew that mindset, as a coach, as a trainer, and as a facilitator, mindset is the root cause and the root catalyst for everything. So climate survey will also just measure how people, you know, the state of how people are thinking or feeling, but it won't measure what's really driving that. So I comb the world, and one of the things, because I love learning, one of the things I did was attended a webinar from the American Training Association that Dr. Brett Richards was presenting,
Yep.
introducing a new tool called the Organisational Growth Indicator. And what it does is it actually measures mindset. It measures the collective mindset of an organisation. So we talk about individual mindset and the importance of a growth mindset, but no one, hardly anyone except for Brett and I, talk about the impact of the collective mindset on an organisation's ability to set a strategy and then to deliver the bottom line results that it wants. So the beauty of the OGI is that it's an ability measure and it links to the bottom line. So if you think of it like this, it measures an organisation's ability to achieve its goals, bang. And on the other hand, it gives you the pathway to building the capability to achieve your goals. So to me, it's so blindingly obvious that it's a really relevant and awesome tool. And the other thing about the OGI that's different to all of the other tools is that it's a 21st century context. So the language is different. The language is really relevant, and it's really about growing through disruption. How can you grow a business with all this stuff going on? You know, all this disruption, by having the most useful collective mindset and building people's capability. It's to deliver a digital transformation or not. A bit of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So we're really looking at it's a tool that allows you to, one, measure mindset of people in an organisation, and also what the impact and what your capabilities to deliver on it. obviously fill in some gaps, and then you can look at, all right, where we need to improve to actually get results that we're looking for. It's no good just setting a strategic objective and then not having the capability nor the mindset to be able to deliver on that. And I think, and that's the gap. So you're looking at closing that gap and getting an understanding of what that gap is, who we need to bring into the business, what tactical things may we do to actually deliver upon that. And then tactical comes last. It's not the first thing. So sometimes we start at tactical first. And I've heard you say this before. We may, for example, let's run a hackathon to drum up some ideas. And that's a tactical thing. It's not nothing to do with anything pre that. It won't necessarily deliver anything beyond the actual hackathon. So I find that interesting as to starting way back, looking at where we're coming from, what our mindset is, what our gaps are, and then what we need to actually deliver our strategic objective.
It's a great example of the hackathon because it's really good fun. It's really energetic.
Yeah.
People get to contribute. If the environment does not support the implementation of the ideas, what's the point?
Yeah.
So that's why culture is key in innovation, because what there needs to be is a psychologically safe environment where there is permission to learn by failing, which terrifies most Australian companies. And the environment, people need to be trusted and have permission. Permission was my big word that I learned last year, to collaborate, experiment and innovate. Because there's no innovation without collaboration and experimentation, and they're both cultural attributes.
Yeah, so permission is actually a really cool word. So when you look at, when you're looking to innovate or change anything, you need permission to fail, permission to also succeed and actually disrupt, because success may mean a big impact to organisations, and permission to actually try and give something a go. So I think when we're looking at permission, I think that's a big thing in terms of shifting mindset, and that's to come from top down, I would believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So we talk about the gamer mindset.
Okay.
You know, is people to actually bring fun and play into the work environment, you know, through the gamer mindset, which is a lot of what I saw in the startup community in Israel. Everyone was a gamer. That doesn't mean that you're just playing online games, but the whole innovation gig is a game.
So what's the gamer mindset at a top level?
It's about improvising, experimenting, failing, having play, fun, learning by doing, you know, all the things that we tend to not do here in Australia because there's not a lot of permission. We tend to beat people up when they make mistakes, punish them if they fail. We're good at blame, shame and envy here in Australia rather than really, you know, because we're risk adverse.
Yeah. Yes. Whereas in the game, you're happy to take the risk because there's no real risk or outcome that can affect you. Yeah.
So you need to, you know, developing that appetite for risk is really important, and then how much risk are you going to take?
Yeah.
And what are the consequences? What are the risks and what are the rewards? What are the consequences? So they're all the things that, you know, people need to think about strategically as well.
Yes. So you mentioned obviously Australia is very risk averse. What are some examples of some great companies in Australia that are actually implementing some great cultures, great innovative pieces, and actually delivering output and result? Do you have any examples of those off the top of your head?
I've been to a few public forums where Atlassian have spoken, Don Powell.
Yes.
And he'll get up and talk about all the great things that they're doing for people. He'll never get up and talk about the technology. It's really interesting.
Yeah, people first.
And he always talks about people, and you know, these guys are Australia's first unicorn.
Yes.
And what's so great about them is that they're really generous with sharing what's worked for them. So they've even got an online team handbook that you can download.
Okay. Well, might be interesting to a few people, so that will just be on the Atlassian website, they could find that.
I believe so, yeah. So there's a few, Canva.
Yep.
Canva's doing great things. How could we live now without Canva? So, and these companies are much more working the 3 Ps, people, profit, planet.
Yes.
They're much more interested in leaving a legacy.
Mm.
On the manufacturing front, there's companies that, I won't mention brands, but who are doing cutting edge, world-class engineering,
Okay.
really entrepreneurial, but are realising that it's not just about the product, it's also about the people.
Mm. So there are obviously great examples, obviously Canva and Atlassian, of businesses that are really startup and started from nothing. I find it's easier to find those examples, and I find it challenging to find corporates that are doing it well, because they've obviously got that backbone of infrastructure, of culture, and the way they've done things, and the hierarchical nature of them. So from looking at it from that lens, what are the challenges that some of the corporates will have moving forward over the next 5-10 years if they don't shift the way they're doing things?
Well, it goes back to this. Thanks, another great question. Thank you.
Okay.
It goes back to where we started. It's having the necessity.
Mm-hmm.
So in the old days, we used to talk about the business case or the burning platform.
Yep.
So take the manufacturing industries. Why in Australia did we not invent the electric car? Why did we close down all the car manufacturing facilities? And I recently heard from a client last week that there is I think they were a German group's taken over the old auto manufacturing plant to manufacture, guess what? Electric cars.
Yes.
So, and growing up in the fashion industry, you know, there is very little homegrown Australian textile clothing and footwear industry anymore. And I guess what you know I've learned from that is that there needs to be receptivity to change. But neurologically we're not wired to be receptive to change. So when we're living in a VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous, our neurology goes into either, and I'm just really simplifying this, neurologically we go into preserving the status quo because we feel safer. So that's like a freeze reaction. We'll go into avoidance, pretend it's not happening here, or we'll go into resistance. So what it does, because it creates cognitive dissonance, people will move away from change. So the first thing is to understand that that's pretty normal and use the cognitive dissonance and the creative tension to actually develop creative energy for innovation and change. So that's how we work it, you know, that's a fact, that's what happens to people. So there has to be sort of more readiness and receptivity, and know that, you know, change is a tough gig.
Yes.
But there are ways through it, and to actually accept the discomfort as part of it, and move out of that complacency and permafrost, and build the passionate purpose, you know, to really make a difference in line with your values and in line with your unique value proposition. So I think that's probably the first step, is to have that passionate purpose and then really set it out strategically. So I met with a client last week and she said, I'm responsible for developing the innovation strategy and I haven't got a clue where to start. And this is on one of the biggest insurance companies in the APAC region. So do your research. Find out what your customers, find out, use data. We've got so much data now. Find out what the patterns and trends are with customers. Find out what the patterns and trends are in the in your operating system. View innovation systemically, that it's, you know, it is people, it is strategy, it is system, it is technology. Focus on developing the appetite and the hunger and the receptivity to thinking, to being thinking and doing things differently. I think the biggest challenge here in Australia is the willingness to collaborate, because we're naturally very cooperative and very affiliative.
Yes.
You know, we like being friendly, but we're also very competitive. We like winning.
Yeah,
So,
everyone's trying to keep the competitive advantage to themselves.
Yeah, so it's finding that happy balance of let's win together, and that's what the Israelis do. They have an ecosystem where they're the highest, they get the highest on the Global Innovation Index. The government allocates the highest percentage of funds to R&D of any other country in the world. They're number one. So I'm working with a client at the moment where this is their reality. So R&D needs to work with academia, needs to work with technology company, needs to work with manufacturing companies, needs to work with business associations and industries. So together we can achieve more. So it's beyond team. You know, team is great, but it's how can we collaborate to compete globally. That's what the Israelis do. They have government, the Israel Defence Forces, which forces innovation. They have the technology companies, they have the startup community, and they have the universities all working jointly in a collaborative way. It's called co-petition, to collaborate internally to compete externally. So I think that's a big challenge for us here in Australia.
Yeah, we don't have anything like that here in Australia, right?
From silos, from
Yeah.
silos and turfs, you know, into we, from I to we.
And there's a lot of probably
from them to us.
there's probably a lot of wasted resources because a lot of ideas happen at the same time with different people. So if multiple people working on the same ideas independently, you're not going to get the same result.
No, and you can be, like, again, I think we need to sit back and look at, we're a little country over on the other side of the world and we are competing globally, and if we don't step back and look at, all right, what could we do differently, we're really going nowhere fast from an innovation perspective. I don't see how do we compete with the vast numbers that exist across your Chinas, your Indias that are up and coming markets that are coming through. How are we going to compete as this little country in our own world if we're not actually deliver anything beyond iron ore at the back of a mine up in Queensland or WA? So there's definitely some thinking that we need to do, and that's not sustainable either. So and if we look at planet, then resource is not really serving our planet at all. So it can create a huge different shift, even in the way we run our economy here, for us to change. What are your thoughts on the way the government supports innovation in Australia?
Oh, that's another huge question. I really loved the policy that Malcolm Turnbull introduced.
Okay.
I think his biggest challenge is the oppositional culture that exists within our government.
Yeah.
It's part of the not invented here syndrome, which is very pervasive here, and everyone talked the talk without really putting it into anything that I saw that was really a strategy. And because it was put in the too hard basket, it sort of fell down further and further in the in the urgency and importance basket. And like a lot of things here in Australia, they thought if they just threw money at it, that it would all happen. And didn't really realise the complexity and the challenges involved in innovation. And when you have I'm sorry I'm politically biased, when you have a minister stand up there with a lump of coal in his hand and you listen to the Radio National podcasts of who's running the place.
Yes.
I think big challenge is the self-interest in a lot of the lobbyists and industry associations that are influencing government as opposed to people influencing government. But that's starting to change with
when they're trying to push
like
clean coal.
Trying to push clean coal.
When they're trying to push clean coal, that's very obvious.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think the government could be much more proactive, and I think they could be much more strategic.
Yes.
I know as a woman, when I applied for a commercialisation grant, when I was building the startup game a number of years ago, had I been a different person, I would have left that room and closed my business down because of the really appalling behaviour of the consulting team that I met with. So a lot has to change. You know, it goes back to the 4 pillars. It's to be strategic, it's got to be systemic, it's got to be about the people. I think the biggest opportunity here in Australia, you know, are our people. You know, we are just such an untapped resource.
And we're a good culture of people.
And education. We have some of the best education institutions in the world. And I know I've been mentoring for the executive MBA for the RMIT School of Business and Law on their consulting project. And these guys, they're all top managers in their field, doing more by getting an MBA and actually saying at the end of the consulting project, this was the most important part of my education, is going out and learning by doing.
Yeah, and everyone realises that after the fact, that when they walk out of uni, you don't actually get much being in there, reading a textbook and actually, just memorising data, really. It's all about actively doing and then using your mind to actually think and solve problems. That's where it all comes to the fore, right?
Which goes back to culture.
Yeah.
Have a culture that, you know, that activates that and promotes it and is receptive to that and has the technology that can capture it. So this is a really funny anecdote. So one of my clients thought that in order to be more innovative and capture that capability in their people, if they put in an ideation platform,
yes,
you know, then everything would be great because people could put ideas in and the system could capture them and put them into projects. However, when we did the research, the research revealed that people would never have used the system because there was no permission in the environment to put forwards an idea, because the underlying belief running the organisation was that only the founders can innovate. So they would have spent millions of dollars on putting in technology and no one would have used it because they didn't believe that what they thought or felt mattered.
So they went to, like you said before, tactic first. So here's a here's a tool.
Both that.
Yes.
So, you know, build the permission and the safety and the trust, and you know, and teach people how to engage in creative conversations, how to listen, how to ask questions, how to problem solve, how to think from a divergence, convergence, emergence perspective, and then get your ideation platform.
Yes,
you know, and then look at what's going to add value to the quality of people's lives in terms of projects.
Get that. So, yeah, we've been obviously involved with some organisations that throw ideation platforms out there. They get hundreds of ideas, and then they end up, this is very different, they get ideas, right? And then they end up funding 2 or 3, and then people think, why is my idea not funded? And then they get shitty because no one's putting up funding for their concept because it's their idea.
They think every idea is a good idea.
Yeah, so it's all about just setting up a safe zone for people to work in, but also setting up the guidelines too, how it all works, what the purpose of that ideation platform is for. But you have to be confident that you're putting an idea up and it's going to be heard and it's going to be sought after and people are going to actually engage with it. So people want to feel a bit comfort too there.
But also, how does it link to the strategy? How does it link to the organisation's capability?
Yeah.
That's what marketing is about, matching need to capability.
Yes.
You know, how does it link to what customers might need and want in the future? How does it link to the customer experience? You know, there's a lot of questions. So questions are the new answers.
I get that. So the
questions you can ask, the better.
Yeah, the learning I've had over the years is the better the question, the better the answer. So the more challenging questions we can ask ourselves and our people, the better results we're going to get from them. To sum up, Janet, the key topic and takeaways for someone or a business that's looking to start an innovation process or knows that things are changing and they need to do something in their organisation. Maybe their revenue slipping, their profit margin slipping a little bit. Where do we start? You mentioned at the start, during this conversation, maybe look at research and trends. That could be a good starting place. Understanding maybe an organisation may need to go back to their passionate purpose, looking at, is that actually being brought in by the organisation? Are people and culture aligned? What do you recommend if an organisation out there knows that time is changing, disruptive businesses are coming about, my industry may be impacted next? Where should they start? What should they be thinking?
That's a really great question. I think, as a coach, as a facilitator, a trainer and a consultant, is to always start with identifying your strengths.
Yes.
Like, what are you really good at?
Mm-hmm.
What are you really good at? List those strengths and start to also ask the question, what really matters to me, to us as an organisation?
Yep.
So on the one hand, you're talking about how do you build on those strengths, and when you talk about what really matters, what are the values that are driving your organisation? And then start to really talk about, who are our customers, how happy are they, how well are we serving them, and what's their experience of us now? And then starting to ask some of those big questions. Why is what we do important?
Yes.
How can we make a bigger difference to, add value to the quality of our customers' lives in ways they appreciate and cherish? How might we connect more deeply with our current customers? Who might our future possible customers be? Who's already playing in the space? How are they competing? Mm-hmm. In a way, it's sort of marketing 101. What are the available niches? Like,
yes.
There's a stack of innovation consultants, but our niche is on the people side of innovation.
Get it. Okay.
And specifically in mindset and culture and coaching. So there's millions of competitors, but there aren't as many that can do it as well as we can. So ours is, and asking what are the risks, and then what are the possibilities, And then it takes a big bucket of passion and determination, positive thinking, really setting your strategy, making sure that you have systems in place, and obviously doing something like an OGI that'll tell you what your operating mindsets are now, how that will impact on your ability to achieve your strategy or not, and how to fine-tune your organisation going forwards through systemic and collective mindset change to achieve what you want to do. you know.
Sums it up beautifully. So the way I would frame it would be, innovation is not something you do. You have to take 35 steps back and really look at your organisation as a whole. It's a holistic look in to see where you are, maybe really assessing why you're there in the first place, why your business exists. Your business might have been around for 50 years, but the purpose you're serving has changed, and the customers are changing and evolving. So you need to really look at that again, and then know where to start. So measure it, know what you're good at, know what your gaps are, and then bring in the people that are actually going to help you progress down the line. So that was a really good take on where a business could start. And obviously it's not for the faint-hearted. It's not something you can just do off the cuff and say, yes, we're innovating today.
And it doesn't happen overnight.
No.
Yeah, they're two really good points. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
So the words that I play with now, and I've been playing with as a startup entrepreneur, and I'm sure you guys have as well, it's courage, boldness, bravery. They're really old-fashioned words.
Yes.
Determination, resilience, self-efficacy, and then your point is you're in it. It's not a race; it's a marathon.
Yeah, you have to live it, not.
And you've got to hold. You've got to sustain the energy and the passionate purpose, which is why intrinsic motivation is so important, because that's what's going to keep you in the game. And it's called the roller coaster. It's a roller coaster ride. So you need a lot of healthy self-compassion for when you do fail and make mistakes, and you need a lot of ability to think differently and be creative. You know.
I like that little statement. Innovation. It's not a race; it's a marathon. I think that's a really good takeaway from today. Just to look at. It is a long, drawn-out process, but if you put one foot in front of the other and you do it from the right frame, well, I think you're on the right path. Janet, thanks for having us today and sharing your insights, and really appreciate you being a part of this. If anyone wants to learn more about Janet, can you share some information about how they can find about you and how to reach out?
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you. It's good fun. I love talking about innovation. ImagineNation is imagine and then nation.com.au, and you can see what we do is we do bespoke innovation consulting services, blended learning programs and coaching programs. Everything we do is customised. We are trainers, consultants, facilitators and coaches, and we've all been in business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an ex-Coles Myer executive from a very long time ago. We walk the talk, and there's a new website, janetsernack.com.au, which is focusing essentially on innovation coaching.
Okay.
So the consulting, and at the end of the day, Andrew, a lot depends on leadership. We've really experienced in the leadership learning space, corporate learning space, and it's leaders who will shape their organisation's future. So we're very proficient at working with leaders and leadership teams.
Brilliant. Thank you, Janet. Thanks for sharing and appreciate your time today.
Have a great day.